falsehoods conservatives have been spreading about recounts in their fundraising emails has officially spread to at least one phone call with a former supporter. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the pipeline talk that came out of Carney's meeting with the premiers yesterday, and we're going to talk about a massive sweeping new piece of legislation, which altogether have me wondering if this Beaverton headline is less satire and more reality. But to kick things off, we're going to talk about the conservatives playing with fire once again. That's according to some exclusive reporting from CBC News, so you should really go and read the whole article from Kate McKenna because I haven't independently confirmed this. But to summarize, a former Conservative Party supporter recorded a phone call and leaked it to the CBC, who then verified and confirmed that it came from the Conservative Party. In the call, which happened a week after the judicial recounts had finished and the results were locked in, someone who identified herself as being from the Conservative Party supporter services, and CBC actually called back the number and confirmed that this was a Conservative Party fundraising number. Yeah, that caller told the former donor, quote, "Right now, the liberal media is attacking us. They're trying to scrutinize our results here. So we need to stand up. We need to make sure that all the votes are accurate and counted." Baby, that ship has sailed. And when the former donor pushed back on these claims, because again, the counting is done, the recounts are locked in, they've been overseen by a judge, it is finito, the party official apparently hung up. Yikes. When 25% of the people who support your party that spoke to the pollsters at Leger said they don't trust the election results, quote, at all, I think you kind of have a responsibility to not fan those flames. Anyway, in other news, the premiers seem to be absolutely buzzing after their meeting yesterday with Mark Carney. Ontario Premier Doug Ford even described Mark Carney as Santa Claus.
I described him today as Santa Claus. He's coming, and his sled was full of all sorts of stuff. Now he's taking off back to the North Pole. He's going to sort it out, and then he's going to call us. So, and we're building a short of Santa Claus is my big belly. I got to loan it to him.
That's probably a good analogy because in a meeting where all the premiers brought the major projects that they want to see approved and expedited, it doesn't sound like Carney told anyone no. That said, no one got a yes either. But Carney left the door very open to the possibility of a pipeline being built. Take a listen.
And specifically within energy, opportunities, yes, for an oil pipeline to get to Tidewater. Now, within the broader context of national interest, the interest is in, as mentioned in the press release, decarbonized barrels. So working alongside forms of decarbonization for those barrels. That is absolutely in our interest. It provides diversification of trade partners. It provides the development of new industries. It provides economic activity across the west and into the north. So yes, there's real potential there.
That pipeline support seems to be contingent on, according to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, their ability to find a private partner.
I think that there will be a proponent that will step forward. My view would be that we'll have failed at the assignment if government has to build another pipeline. That will demonstrate to us that we didn't create the conditions for private investment to come to the table.
But it also seems to be contingent on what Carney called decarbonization and the use of carbon capture technology, which might sound like it could reassure folks who are worried about the environmental impact of another pipeline, but I regret to inform you it is time for a reality check. Because wildfires are currently raging in the prairie provinces, including the one where Mark Carney met with the premiers, and we know those wildfires, as I broke down in yesterday's video, are exacerbated by climate change. And that is just one of the many existential and terrifying threats the climate crisis presents. So should you totally trust this implication that Canada decarbonizing barrels of oil is sufficient to mitigate the climate-related harm of further investment in infrastructure intended to facilitate the export of fossil fuels? Yeah, no. When I teamed up with the National Observer to do Fact Check Fridays during the election campaign, we actually broke down this exact issue. See, carbon capture and storage is basically when the carbon produced from, say, power generation is literally captured and stored. A lot of oil companies actually inject this captured carbon into depleted oil reserves to get even more oil out of it, which means even more emissions. So not all carbon capture and storage, as my friend Emily wrote here, is created equal. But anyways, the point of carbon capture and storage is to lower the amount of emissions it takes to produce, say, a barrel of oil. And the evidence on whether that actually works is questionable. Existing carbon capture projects routinely fail to meet their targets. Even if they work as advertised, climate experts rate carbon capture among the most expensive and least effective options to address climate change. That's because, again, while carbon capture and storage reduces the amount of emissions it takes to produce a barrel of oil, the majority of emissions from fossil fuels come when that fuel is burned. From a planetary perspective, it doesn't matter much if the oil is made cleaner using carbon capture if more oil is ultimately burned. So what it comes down to is this. Canada can technically lower its emissions under the Paris Agreement by using carbon capture and storage if we assume equal or lower oil and gas production. But if carbon capture is used to justify higher levels of oil and gas production, global emissions will continue to rise. And funny, that sounds like exactly what Carney and Smith were talking about in that press conference. Using carbon capture as a justification for building a pipeline. Not to mention that there is fresh reporting from the Toronto Star today that Mark Carney's Justice Minister Sean Fraser said First Nations don't have a veto over nation-building projects. So, I think we should watch how Mark Carney's Liberal government proceeds on pipelines very carefully. Because right now, I'm seeing some red flags. Speaking of red flags, we got a hot new piece of legislation in the House of Commons today. Bill C2, also called the Strong Borders Act, is a big one. It's sweeping, touching on immigration, financial and organized crime, and more. To pull out a few highlights, it gives increased power to Canada's security and intelligence services, expanding their powers to look at mail and allowing them to suspend or even cancel immigration documents. It requires electronic services providers to fulfill lawfully authorized requests to access or intercept information and communications. On top of all that, if this is passed, anyone seeking asylum, even if they're a student or a temporary resident, will have to make their claim within a year of entering Canada. And anyone who enters Canada irregularly, so not through the official border crossings, will have to make their asylum claims within 14 days of entering the country. It also contains some elements that are very clearly designed to please Trump, like amending legislation to allow more control of the chemicals that are used to make something that rhymes with schmentanil, and provisions to amp up border surveillance and cross-border action targeting organized crime. It's a huge bill, so I am sure there is more in this that I have missed. But overall, between this bill and the pipeline talk, this Beaverton headline is starting to feel uncomfortably accurate. What do you think of all this?